Hey, Max from the Watch List here with our new channel series, Worst to Best. James Cameron has a reputation for being difficult to work for. Some people from the set say that if a cell phone went off during filming, he would pin the phone to a wall with a nail gun. Actors say that he was comically hands-on and would try to do every job on set. Others say that's because he could. Active from 1981 to 2007 with a list of failed projects that eclipses his list of completed projects, this perfectionist has been responsible for some of the most successful films ever made, spanning across multiple genres. Our task today is to rank the works of James Cameron definitively from worst to best. Now, at the Watch List, we believe that any ranking needs a rubric to be valid. Otherwise, it's just someone's opinion on the internet. Therefore, we're going to rate Cameron's films based on 4 different criteria. These aren't the only possible criteria, these are just the ones we chose because they made the most sense to us. The first one's the most subjective, the Cameron factor. Is this recognizably a James Cameron film? Does it have the tropes present that he is most associated with as a director? These tropes include, but aren't limited to, underwater scenes, often with diving gear, strong female protagonists, bureaucratic government or army antagonists, war is hell, family unit reuniting at the end or the creation of a surrogate family, a very active or visible Chekhov's gun, often comic or ironic catchphrases,
chill out, dickwad,
repeated use of actors, Stan Winston special effects, or Gail Ann Hurd as a producer. The next criteria will be where we judge the film's quality. The way that we're going to judge quality will be the script, concept, thematic resonance, character development, structure, performances, audio and visual quality, cinematography, and editing. The next criteria will be entertainment value. Was the film fun to watch at the end of the day? Our last criteria will be whether the film holds up in 2020. Is the film still relevant compared to other similar films in its genre and time period? Has it aged well and to an easy watch in 2020? Now, each film will get a score from 1 to 5 on each category to make a possible 20 points. Then we will rank them numerically from worst to best. Feel free to give your own rankings in the comments. We're going to start at the bottom of the barrel. You don't really see Cameron in this film at all. Outside of the gratuitous time-filling diving scenes, which make up easily half the movie, you can't see Cameron's fingerprints at all. If you had said that it was directed by the lesser Salt Flats Florida Tourism Board's stand-in director during a famine year, I'd believe you. The film print looks like it's been preserved in pickling vinegar. It's a by-the-numbers B movie where at least 3/4 of the runtime is spent in tedious buildup, failed humor, and none of the characters are particularly likable in this shameless Jaws ripoff cash grab. It was also filmed in Italy and all the lines are dubbed over. Poorly. This film gets a little bit of goodwill back for sheer ridiculousness. I don't want to fool you into thinking that it's so bad it's a good kind of movie. It's not. It's boring. But there's a lot of nudity, and the idea that the piranhas being grafted together with flying fish makes for some goofy scenes where they go for the neck like little flounder vampires. Pure camp. This film was made in 1981 and looks dated for 1963. It makes sense that Cameron tried to disown this film. It's nearly unwatchable in 2020. Total score, 6. After seeing this film, I think it's clear that Cameron felt there was nowhere left to go for Titanic. He's sort of right. He had succeeded in nearly every other genre outside of, westerns, and he was content to direct documentaries and produce other people's films. Avatar doesn't feel uniquely Cameron except for its criticism of the military bureaucracy, scientific and capitalist myopia, all from a liberal but not leftist point of view. You believe it's Cameron directing, but it's not uniquely Cameron. If you told me J.J. Abrams directed this, I'd believe you. This film was beautiful to look at. I'm usually not a fan of CGI graphics and am nearly impossible to please with them. But this film shut me up. The performances are great. Sam Worthington is great in his dual performance. The bad guy is memorable. Sigourney Weaver is likable as a scientist. The world building is good. a lot of information given without chunky exposition. But I don't like Pandora. It's lazy, it's pastiche. Traits from real indigenous groups are put in a blender to make a white projection of the noble, savage archetype. This is an insult to all indigenous peoples. It's at best patronizing and horribly reductive, and at worst a buffet table of racist tropes. Much has been made about how this is Dances with Wolves or Last of the Mohicans with a science fiction skin, but this analysis implies those movies were good, as if the problem is originality. The story of a white man infiltrating an indigenous society and learning from the doomed noble savages is not just a trite story structure, but a pernicious one. It gives a white audience a character who didn't exist in real life to relate with, while bemoaning genocide as something they were separated from. Because of course, if they were in the story, they'd be Sam Worthington or Daniel Day-Lewis or Kevin Costner. But no, that wasn't a real choice. This liberal shrugging away of responsibility under the guise of respectful admiration is insidious, and the fact that it takes place on a made-up planet with made-up people doesn't meaningfully change that, especially if the tropes from these fake indigenous people are based on real indigenous people. It's got some thrilling action, likable characters, and isn't overly long, but the bad politics ruins the enjoyment factor for me. Even though the Na'vi are presented as good and moral and noble, I can't help but feel they're the butt of the joke. It's part of the white escapist fantasy. We're watching blue humanoid aliens in loincloths do a lazy pastiche of real indigenous cultures that is only inoffensive because the fact that it's quote-unquote not real gives them plausible deniability, although clearly the individual traits of the Na'vi are appropriated part from real indigenous cultures. The focus on the mysticism is patronizing. The reductive "we are all one with nature" fortune cookie theology. The shoehorning of violence done to the indigenous into something done by stupid corporations and military instead of something that we all participate in every day under capitalism. The papyrus font subtitles, I just don't like it. My issues with this film are purely ideological, but it does affect my enjoyment of the film. I'll be the first to admit it. If you can get past the terrible premise, it looks like it was made this year and holds up completely. It's a beautiful film. Total score, 13. Cameron is clearly trying to exercise different muscles in this film. It's part effective comedy, part effective spy thriller, part Arnold action movie, and part Cameron dealing with the PTSD from a marriage or three. There's preservation of the family unit and some gratuitous TNA, but other than that, Cameron's usual obsessions are absent from this one. This is an effective movie. It's beautifully shot, and both Arnold and Jamie Lee Curtis are super likable with beautiful supporting work from Tom Arnold and Bill Paxton. The script is smart and plays to everyone's strengths while following a pretty typical 3-act structure. This movie never takes itself too seriously. There are a lot of effective gags throughout, but at the core it's a movie about the importance of communication and fulfillment in marriages. More effectively than the previous year's Last Action Hero, it sends up Arnold's famous character while also reveling in it. There's a lot of dated, xenophobic representation of Middle Eastern people who were the enemy du jour in the mid-90s. It almost sinks it for me. It just is kind of baked in pro-military nationalism that was par for the course of the time. But I expect better from Cameron, who has made the opposite claim in better films. Still watchable though. Final score, 14. Cameron is in his bag on this film. All of his obsessions are present. Chekhov's guns that always come back. Groundbreaking underwater filming and effects, strong female protagonist, family unit coming back together, military and bureaucratic antagonists, aliens. Every feature of a James Cameron film is present here. That's kind of the problem. This film is a collection of beautiful moments. A fight in a flooded sub with hanging lights, water you can breathe, fluorescent aliens, a sub blowing up, a spaceship rising from the bottom of a trench, a water snake, a woman coming back to life after drowning. It's as beautiful and creative a film as you could want. It was well received and is remembered fondly for its images, but what this hides is that there's no coherent story here. The characters are underdeveloped. There's no build. It's a series of events in isolation. Cameron is known for his overlapping multiple-part climaxes, but the final hour of this film is one ending after another. It's exhausting. At the end of the day, I don't know these characters, and I'm not given a compelling reason to care about them. It's just stuff happening on screen for almost 3 hours. Like I said, this film's exhausting. It's the rare Cameron film where I became aware of the runtime, especially with the extended cut, which just adds another half hour of aliens, basically. It feels derivative of better films like Close Encounters, and there's some heavy-handed metaphor for death that never comes together for me. Since I don't care about the characters and the story is difficult to follow to the extent that it's there, I alternated between boredom and overstimulation. There are individual scenes that make it worth the watch, but it's not regarded as a classic for a reason. This level of directorial autonomy would never be allowed in today's culture of homogenization. This is a double-edged sword. It feels aimless in a way that would never be allowed today, but the special effects, cinematography, and editing are good by today's standards, let alone for a 30-year-old film. Final score, 15. This is the first film where Cameron established his directorial vision. He famously fought for the signature multi-part climax. The suits wanted to end the film after the truck blew up, but Cameron made sure that they included the ending where the Terminator is crushed by the compressor. Before Cameron made Ripley an iconic female protagonist, he gave Sarah Connor one of the best character arcs in science fiction. Cameron's mistrust of bureaucratic authority and the military is on full display as well. This is one of the best science fiction screenplays ever written, and the performances are exactly what they need to be for their purposes. Arnold's wooden delivery is a plus here, but the most effective is Michael Biehn as a beautifully traumatized sacrificial lamb. However, the limitations of the budget are visible in the quality of the film itself. It looks like a VHS tape from the 80s, and the sound mixing leaves something to be desired. An easy A. It might not be as bombastic as the sequel, but a lot of iconic moments are present in this first film. The aforementioned climax, the siege of the precinct, I'll be back, the Terminator speaking as her mother, the twist at the end where Biehn's character is John's father, that beautiful, haunting score. So much of the story has become so thoroughly embedded in our culture that we can't appreciate how revolutionary and innovative it is after 35 years. Still a very easy watch. This film has spawned 5 sequels and only one of them has been any good. Cameron making films into franchises that are lost without him is its own trope. The fact that this 35-year-old film is still the preferred choice is a testament to its longevity. Final score, 19. This is certainly James Cameron's most epic film. Some people may claim that honor goes to Avatar, but Titanic required him to master both historical fiction and romance, both new genres for him, do both compellingly, nestle it in a meta-narrative where a bunch of deep-sea reconnaissance men, another Cameron obsession, are looking for a priceless diamond and interviewing a 101-year-old Titanic survivor to find its whereabouts, while also shoehorning in an action-adventure film where he realistically sinks the Titanic in the second half of the film. The fact that he was able to pull this off at all is an accomplishment. It may, weirdly, feel the least James Cameron of any of his major successes, but it does have his trademark checkoffs. The most obvious being the guardrail for the ship, which has 4 different purposes across the narrative. It's where Jack is first screaming on King of the World, where Rose is ready to attempt suicide, where they have the famous romantic flying scene, and finally where they're holding on for dear life as the ship finally sinks. We also have every millennial teenager's first boobs in a movie that they were allowed to see, and his fixation with the ocean. Otherwise, the only Cameron-esque thing about the film is that it's competently and flawlessly made. There is a lot going on here. It's a movie that at 3.5 hours feels short for what it successfully balances. The scenes that take place in the present bookend the scenes that take place in the past. I've heard people whine that these scenes disrupt the narrative. No, they don't. They do that exactly once, and they do it strategically at the halfway point, divide the part that was an early 20th century romance, which makes us care about the characters, and the second part, which is the disaster film that shows us thinking of the Titanic and the aftermath. Like a well-made multiple-course meal, each section complements the others. I loved seeing the modern-day pirate crew tearing up at this 101-year-old woman's story and their conception of the ship and what it means changing as a result. Some people whine about the romance not being realistic for the time. I think our conception of the past is a little stuffy and unrealistic. We see them as sexless. That was not the case. This story about class, finding meaning in life, and women's role in society was very well considered. We really feel it when the inevitable happens later in the film. Jack is extremely likable, and Rose has a beautiful, realistic character arc that grounds the film. Like most of Cameron's films, every technical aspect is virtuistic as well. It has become popular in recent years for some reason to dislike this movie, or at the very least believe it's overhyped in some way. After looking at its component parts and feeling the effect of the whole, I can't imagine why. I mean, I have some theories. I think that the melodramatic, affecting theme song was overplayed to the point that people developed some contempt for it. I think that that was one of the first films that many millennial film buffs first analyzed, and they associated it with their perceived former lack of discernment or their first celebrity crushes and or outmoded ways of thinking about romance. Ironic, because Jack and Rose's relationship, even if it does take place over the course of only a few days, is substantial. They understand each other on a fundamental level. Way more mature than many decades-spanning relationships I'm aware of. It could be that it was just the biggest thing, and in certain film fandoms, it's cool to hate the biggest thing. Whatever the case, I suggest that people who feel inclined to hate this movie do two things. One, is it possible that part of the reason you don't like this film is because women like it? Could you be doing a misogyny? Two, actually watch the film. You might be pleasantly surprised. Like most of Cameron's work, this film is a technical masterpiece and has held up extremely well. Final score, 19. Sarah Connor is now full Ripley. Arnold is a good guy, and the water observer from the Abyss is repurposed as the main antagonist, P-1000. The bureaucratic unbelievers are twice as annoying in this outing, and there's a great secondary antagonist with the Skynet Corps Chief Grunt. All the Cameron attributes from the first film are here, but cranked up to 11. For a film that could be criticized for basically repeating all the plot beats from the first film, this film's theme seems to be that people can change and that determinism sucks. Every character has an arc in this film. Sarah, John, the Skynet programmer, the Terminator himself. All of them change for the better. It's a hopeful message in a film about the apocalypse. It helps that in addition to flawless scripting, except for a slow section in the middle, peerless characterization, and layered thematic resonance, this is a beautiful film to look at which uses a little bit of CGI but mainly relies on Stan Winston's practical effects. Is it the smartest popcorn movie ever made? Is it the most entertaining cerebral science fiction movie ever attempted? Maybe this is a reductive distinction. In any case, this is a wildly entertaining film, from the mall shootout to the imagery of the playground burning down, to the liquid nitrogen truck exploding, to the helicopter chase, to the phone call to the foster parents, to the Terminator learning 90s slang, to the syringe full of pipe cleaner, to the psychological evaluation gone wrong, to the Lucky Day coffee cup, to the use of a cop as the antagonist in early 90s LA of all places, to the ATM busting, which comes back in a later scene. The combination of super entertaining science fiction with real emotional weight and characters we love growing makes it immersive, high-stakes entertainment. This film came out in 1991. The use of practical effects make it look state-of-the-art for 2021. It is truly timeless with the sole exception of the slang that was used by John Connor. The execution is flawless. Final score, 20 points. All of Cameron's favorite tropes are at play here. Family unit being brought together, surrogate family, redemption arc, female main protagonist who is strong but ignored by the patriarchy, antagonistic bureaucratic military and corporations. The space is filmed like underwater with the atmospheric fog covering the frame like water. Anti-war messaging, Chekhov's gun with the use of the robot in the beginning and brought back for the final fight with the Queen, That iconic final fight. Stan Winston and Gale Anne Hurd both collaborated with Cameron on this film. He is never quite in control of all the elements as he is in this film, in my opinion. And it's funny because the crew that he worked with were all total Ridley Scott loyalists who didn't really want to work with him on this film. They didn't respect him. They didn't know his former work. They hadn't seen The Terminator. They didn't believe that he was capable of pulling this off, and he proved them wrong. They were actually really sexist to his female producer, Gale Anne Hurd. They were pretty terrible, but he famously said, like on the last day of shooting, the good news is I get to move on past this place and you assholes have to stay here. That's him as a director, but this is by far his most effective film. It goes to show that good art often comes out of just unbelievable adversity. From Cameron's original idea, the best science fiction script ever written was created. It's a perfect 3-act structure with great characterization for everyone, but especially Ripley, who clearly has PTSD from the events of the first film. And it's written better than almost any war film I've ever seen. Appropriate that this film is an unambiguous allegory for the US involvement in Vietnam. Though these Marines have superior firepower, they are attacking on the aliens' home turf and don't understand their enemy. They also don't listen to the experts. It's so perfect. There's a great subplot with the only survivor, Newt, becoming Ripley's surrogate daughter since her daughter passed away of old age. These little touches that go so right are what make this such a fantastic film. Of course, the practical effects and the color palette that is dark-hued but completely visible in a way you don't often get now in the CGI era add to the quality. This film borrows from the Jaws playbook, where the aliens are only hinted at for the first half of the movie, and the action ramps up in the second and third act. We have a hell of a twist during the climax where the alien queen is revealed to have snuck on board and she kebabs the replicant character before the final mech battle. It's the best 15 minutes ever put on celluloid if you're a science fiction fan. There are lines everybody remembers that all take place in the same scene, one after another.
That's it, man. Game over, man.
Similarly to his own Terminator franchise, Cameron takes everything that people liked about the first film and supercharges it, puts a powerful heroine at the center of it, and adds a layer of thematic resonance. Ridley Scott's Alien is a great film, but it's essentially a slasher flick in space. This is more ambitious. It's also a much more entertaining watch. Stan Winston's special effects are peerless and hold up beautifully. Combine this with the crispness and film and audio quality that accompany Cameron's perfectionism, and you have a film that is actually timeless. Compare this movie to any of its contemporaries. The difference is startling. This doesn't hold up to anything released in the last few years, especially any Alien movie. It's better. I'd take this over a weightless CGI battle any day of the week. Final score, 20 points. Cameron has a very impressive filmography because his perfectionist mind would rather torpedo a project than release a bad one. I think he clearly has nothing left to prove, and I'd only like to see him return to directing if he has something more to add to the conversation. He has already added so much. Like and subscribe if you like this content. We also have a Patreon if you're feeling generous. Next, I'm going to tackle all 23 of Spike Lee's films. But who else do you think I should do a worst to best for? Do you think I should add to the criteria? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching.
Hasta la vista, baby.